That's how it's supposed to. Esteemed guest and my fellow creatives, welcome to the grand opening ceremony of Unleash, the pioneering conference of the creative industries. Today we gather right here in Grenada, a place known for its vibrant culture, breathtaking landscapes, and of course, rich artistic and cultural heritage. It is my great pleasure, and it is with great excitement and pride that we embark on this incredible journey together. My name is Neela Etienne, and it is my absolute pleasure to be your chairperson and hostess for this morning's ceremony. My friends call me Lady Etienne, so you can do that as well. I'd like to invite, at this point in time, Reverend Royston Gilbert, Senior Pastor at the Springs Open Bible Church, to open us in a word of prayer. Please stand.
Good morning, all. I greet you in the wonderful name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. In the words of Lady Etienne, I'll read from the Word of God, Genesis chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So you are well placed this morning with Grenada's premier creative and cultural conference. Verse 26 says, "And God said, let us make man in our image and our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fishes, the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth." Shall we pray this morning? Our Heavenly Father, we bow humbly in your presence. We thank you, God, for this wonderful gathering here this morning. And even as we gather, Lord God, to create our culture, our industries, I pray, God, that you will give them the wisdom, you will give them knowledge, you will give them understanding. And, oh God, you will unleash or unearth in them, Lord God, the creative minds and ability. Lord, we commit every stakeholder here this morning who have a part to play, Lord God, in Unleash. We commit everything that is to be said and done here, and we ask your divine blessing, Father. We pray, oh God, that everything will go according to plan. We commit every aspect of this program into your hand this morning, and we ask for divine blessing upon it. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. And we all say, amen and amen. God bless you all, and have a wonderful conference.
Thank you, Pastor. Please remain standing with me. We'll now invite Mr. J. McDonald to lead us in the national anthem of Grenada.
Hail, Grenada, land of us, we pledge ourselves to thee. Heads, hearts, and hands in unity to reach our destiny. Ever conscious of God, being proud of our heritage, may we with faith and courage aspire, build, advance as one people, one family. God bless our nation.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jay McDonald. And I got some chills there when everybody else were singing along. Such a beautiful anthem. Thank you so much, everyone. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, Unleash is not just an ordinary conference. It is a catalyst for transformation, a platform for inspiration, and a celebration of the boundless creativity that resides within each and every one of us sitting here today. Over the next few days, we will come together as artists, designers, performers, writers, thinkers, policymakers, and entrepreneurs, united by our shared passion for the arts and the limitless possibilities they offer. As we embark on this important journey, we must recognize the immense potential that lies within the creative industries. They have the power to shape cultures, ignite imaginations, and drive economic growth. The government of Grenada, through the Grenada Office of Creative Affairs, has recognized this potential and has taken bold steps to prioritize and support the development of this sector. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite to the podium the Honorable Minister Lennox Andrews, Minister for Economic Development, Planning, Tourism, ITC, Creative Economy, Agriculture, Lands, Fisheries, and Cooperatives, to the podium. But before he does that, before he does that, we have a special treat for you. Stand by.
2 million years ago, there came a great rumbling. From deep down in the bowels of the ocean floor, earth met wind, and wind met fire, exploding with awesome fury. And the mighty seas were parted. Just like that, we were born. Volcanic lava, liquid and fluid. Volcanic rock, rich and resilient and ready to sustain life.
And winged creatures of the air rained seeds upon the rock, and the seeds took root and grew. Ginger lilies, lantanas, petunias, heliconias, poinsettias, bougainvilleas.
And stately palm trees sprung up along the rocky bays and sandy beaches. And the rainforest grew up in the hills beyond our reaches.
And so our rock became paradise, with flowers and trees and birds and bees and people, blessed and highly flavored people, olive, vanilla, and chocolate mixes, people searching for wealth, survival, and power, and other types of fixes.
And the people on the rock were blended in a stew. The Caribbean pepper pot, the Grenadian callaloo. And people brought stories and made stories, protagonist, antagonist woven into the narrative of the people. Little did they know that their mere existence was clay to sculpt a culture, birth tradition, give meaning to motion and life to a nation, inspiration.
Look around. What we lack in size, we pack in imagination. Imagination, our untapped resource. We source from outside what we have innately within.
but I can feel something coming. Something is coming. Something is about to start. A spark is all we need to unleash this fire.
From the minds of the creative,
Minds given by the Creator.
infused with color and song,
Ideas and rhyme.
perfected with time,
Aged wine.
blended with emotion and soul.
And stories untold. An intoxicating concoction.
Our market, the world. I told you it was going to be a treat. I want to say special thanks to all the people who put this video together, all the faces we saw in the video, and the mastermind behind creating such a beautiful work. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to recognize in our presence and recognize the arrival of Honorable Prime Minister, Honorable Deacon Mitchell. And at this time, I'd like to welcome to the podium Honorable Lennox Andrews. You may be seated, everyone. Honorable Lennox Andrews is the Minister of Economic Development, Planning, Tourism, ICT, Creative Economy, Agriculture and Lands, Fisheries and Cooperatives. Let's welcome him, everyone.
Prime Minister, Honorable Deacon Mitchell, other members of Cabinet, other members of Parliament, former members of Parliament, presenters at this distinguished first ever conference for creatives, creatives from all sectors, representatives of statutory bodies, of the private sector, the media, invited guests. But I would like to also recognize in our midst Dr. Stacy Kennedy from CAF, Development Bank of Latin America. Welcome. And I would also like to recognize in our midst Dr. Didicus Jules, Chairman of the Economic Affairs Secretariat of our OECS. We also have with us our UN representative here this morning. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today and for affording me the next few minutes of your time and your attention. Let me begin by saying how proud I am, not only to be a Grenadian, but also to be a member of our nation's government, which came into power last year under the slogan, Moving Grenada Forward. Of course, no matter what political affiliation, we all embrace ourselves and unite ourselves under this motto, which reads, ever conscious of God, we aspire, build, and advance as one people. These, you know, my people, are the words inscribed in our Grenada's coat of arms. And it signifies the extent to which we as a nation consider and accept God as our creator. And as I look around this room here this morning, I see so many creators. And I know you are just as proud as me to be among this gathering of immensely talented, creative professionals. We have invited you here today to discuss a topic that is both near and dear to your hearts, and which we as a government believe is absolutely vital to Grenada's future, no matter where you find yourself on life's journey. Let me also recognize our acting Governor General. Sorry for the delay. In preparing my remarks, I am reminded of a most famous quote by the French intellectual Victor Hugo, who once wrote, "Nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come." My friends, I think we can all agree that the time has come for Grenada's creative sector, composed of individuals like you, to realize its enormous and untapped potential as an economic powerhouse. Worldwide, creative industries such as the visual and performing arts, culture and fashion, design, advertising and publishing, software and multimedia, broadcasting, and so many more, represent one of the fastest growing segments of the global economy. They account for 6.1% of the global gross domestic product, averaging some $2 trillion in annual revenues, and providing nearly 50 million well-paying jobs worldwide. It is not hyperbole, therefore, to declare that creative industries are capable of transforming entire nations like ours with respect to income generation, quality job creation, and export diversification. Grenada's government accepts the view that every child born in this country is born with a talent, an ability, and a passion for something. For us, Grenada must be like a big school where the opportunity for all is available to develop and enhance that natural passion and use it to provide a good or a service for which there is a demand, and so they can earn an income on their own so that they can live a better and a decent life. As a government, we recognize and appreciate the vast and varied talent we possess in this regard, and so we are committed to investing in our people, in particular our young people, so that over time, we as a country can become more resilient and have a developed economy, recognized both regionally and internationally. We can become an incubator for secure and rewarding jobs, and a catalyst for more beneficial social reforms, including a revitalized national identity. Therefore, this morning, I would like to take this opportunity to outline our government's vision and roadmap for accomplishing this ambitious but necessary undertaking. Admittedly, we are a small island nation that has traditionally relied on tourism and agriculture to fuel our economy, giving our fertile lands beautiful scenery and year-round sunshine. Tourism and agriculture continue to serve us well, and with the implementation of sustainable practices, will remain vital contributors to our island's economy for generations to come. However, Grenada is and should be regarded far more than a breadbasket for tourists and for tourist destination. I say this because Grenadians, as a people, We are, and we have always been, an innovative and a creative people. The depth and breadth of Grenada's culture's heritage can be admired as a gorgeous mosaic of assorted artistic expressions, from our vibrant music scene to our thriving visual arts community and strong literary tradition. And of course, how can we forget our lively carnival culture, just to name a few. The way we see it, Grenada's culture and creative industry, if nurtured properly, can become substantial contributors to economic growth and job creation, as well as a foundational pillar for social and cultural development here on the island and potentially beyond. Of course, this must begin with thoughtful, coordinated efforts to raise more heightened awareness of our nation's abundant creative industries and the obvious benefits to Grenadians of all ages. We also believe it is imperative to implement and support training programs, seminars, and other activities, including establishing and managing a creative industry registry and business network platform that help creative entrepreneurs improve their capacity. Toward this end, our government is committed and determined to foster a more favorable environment that bolsters the economic value of creative industries, in part by identifying and developing natural linkages between them and other sectors. We also seek to institute concessions and other economic incentives for those in the creative industries, while implementing a policy framework for the sector's development that coincides with our 2035 national sustainability goals and objectives. In any business, money is a constant concern. And that is certainly true for our creative industries, which is why we aim to generate more funding opportunities and provide helpful direction towards existing resources of funding that may not yet be common knowledge. And as I alluded to earlier, we have grander ideas and designs to promote Grenada creative communities beyond our borders by supporting the export of creative goods and raising the international profile of our talented groups and individuals within the sector. Certainly, we view this as far more than a one-time exercise and plan to support ongoing research activities within the creative industries to ensure that we are continuously learning and adapting as necessary. My friends, this is our vision, and this is how we plan to make it a reality. Anytime we talk about the future, there can be a natural tendency to assume that we are focusing on the young. But we want to emphasize that we recognize and respect the accomplishment and experience of those who have enjoyed long careers in the creative industries. And we believe there is a place and a role for everyone in this creative future that we envision for Grenada. Finally, with our national motto as a guide, we aspire to a better future for the creative industries, which we plan to build through the steps I have just outlined in order to advance the lives of every single Grenadian. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Minister Andrews. Ladies and gentlemen, Unleash is a national, cultural, and creative Industries Conference that aims to initiate a dialogue, inspire innovation, and pave the way for a brighter future. It is a gathering where ideas collide, collaborations will flourish, and new paths will be forged. At this time, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite my good friend, I think I can call him a friend now, Mr. Orlando Romaine. He's the advisor to the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development with responsibility for ICT, digital, and creative economy. Please welcome him. Please welcome him to the podium. As I understand it, Mr. Romaine is one of the brain children of today's event. So give him another round of applause for that.
Acting Governor General, Madam Decima Williams, Prime Minister Deacon Mitchell, Minister of Economic Development, Planning, ICT, Creative Economy, Tourism, and Agriculture, Minister Lennox Andrews, other cabinet colleagues, specially invited guests, a pleasant good morning to all. My task here today is very simple. I plan to lay out our government's one-year roadmap for developing the creative economy. As Minister Andrews mentioned, we see the creative economy as one that can generate significant economic and social benefits for all Grenadians. I believe for the first time in modern history, we have the opportunity to shape a sector in our likeness and image. If you look at tourism, it's dominated mostly by foreign investment. And so a lot of the revenues flow outwards. You look at agriculture, we produce a lot of crops here, but we export the products and then we import the refined goods. And so we have never been able to maximize the revenue generation and yield from our sectors. And I think if we take a very strategic approach to developing the creative economy, we can do just that. Design an economy, design a sector where Grenadians, the average Grenadians in the rural communities, in the urban communities, the old, the young, are the ones who are the main beneficiaries of the output of those economic activities. And so I'm very encouraged by this initiative that the government has embarked on. And I've given my full time, energy, and brain power to ensuring that it takes lift in the way that it should. As Minister Andrews alluded, there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come. And our government believes the time has come to transform Grenada into a creative and innovation-driven economy. What does that mean? It means we want to ensure that our country focuses on activities in the knowledge economy, where our citizens can develop goods and products locally and export that internationally. We have a huge brain drain problem. Many of our experts leave the shores of Grenada to find jobs overseas. And yes, they do send back remittances, but I believe there's more gain we can have if they stay right here in our shores and bring the monies back to Grenada. And so we want to ensure that that is realized. Now, the creative economy is a buzzword. All right, many persons use it interchangeably between the creative industries and the creative economy. But it has a very defined definition. Essentially, the creative economy is an ecosystem that includes the creative practitioners, which are the cultural persons, the artists, the dancers, the musicians, the filmmakers. They represent the core of the creative industries. But it also includes a broader ecosystem, the financiers, the lawyers, the academics and educators, the policymakers. They are necessary in this ecosystem to ensure that the creatives have the support that they need to ensure that their economic opportunities are realized. And so that is one of the things our country, our government wants to ensure, that we don't just build the creatives themselves, but we ensure there's a strong ecosystem that can support them. And so I'm encouraged to see members of the Bar Association here today, members of the banking community, members of the education community, fellow persons in the diaspora, all here to discuss one subject matter, our creative economy. How can we build this and leverage the potential that it has? I want to state that the creative economy is not only one of the most rapidly growing sectors in the world's economy, it is also highly transformative in terms of its import potential, income generation opportunities, and job creation. And there's one thing that's unique about the creative economy. The jobs it creates are not just simply jobs. They are high-paying, high-quality jobs. Far too often I hear policymakers and politicians talk about job creation, and most times it's the bottom-level jobs that really don't empower and move our people forward. The creative economy has the potential to create quality jobs that really improve the lives of our people in meaningful ways. So what do we want to achieve by investing in the creative economy? Firstly, we want to create a more resilient economy capable of weathering external economic shocks. Right? We all know what happens to a country when anything in the global community happens that has a multiplier effect on our economy here, jobs, and certainly foreign income. And so it's imperative that our government looks to new sectors that allows us some level of cushioning so that we can survive when these economic shocks happen. And they will come. We saw what happened to COVID, and we can expect to see more turbulences as the years unfold. As I mentioned, we want to ensure that we generate high-quality jobs through the creative economy. The creative economy provides so many opportunities in fashion, in film, multimedia, creative directing, game development. It's a plethora of various practices that, if developed properly, can create that high-quality job profile that we're looking for. Additionally, we want to ensure that we increase our foreign earnings. The creative economy has a huge potential to increase our foreign earnings by increasing our ability and the quality of our creative exports. And if we develop the sector properly, we can see a certain increase in our foreign earnings and certainly an increase in our balance of payment. And certainly we want to ensure that the creative economy is able to drive the social transformation that we need. If you think of Hollywood and what it has done for the US, it has allowed America to define its image and project that onto the world. All right, through cartoons and magazines and superheroes. All right, and it's a powerful reflection of the people. It's a powerful reflection of themselves. And so we can use the creative economy to do the same thing. We have a marvelous story here, the revolution. How have we taken that story, we package it to our advantage, to shape our identity and who we are to the world? So it's not just economic, but it's also social. Now, I'm going to speak to the converted, but I'm just really going to outline here how we define the creative economy in terms of its taxonomy. Essentially, it includes 6 key areas: visual arts and craft, audiovisuals and multimedia, books and press, design and creative services, performing arts and celebration, and cultural heritage. And for the most part, Grenada has occupied the space of visual arts, books and press, performing arts, and cultural heritage. But there's another set of activities happening in the digital space that I think we haven't done justice to, we haven't tapped into sufficiently. And those are the sectors, together with the other sectors, that can really help us to transform what we have been doing organically here in Grenada. As I mentioned before, the creative economy at its core represents 3 layers: the core cultural practitioners, the wider creative service providers such as filmmakers, advertisers, architects, musicians, and creative directors, but also the business element of things and the legal aspect of things. As Minister Andrews mentioned, it is a massive economy worldwide. It contributes about 6.1% of global GDP, generates about $2 trillion in annual revenues, and creates about 50 million jobs worldwide. The question is, how many of those jobs, what percentage of that revenue is Grenada carving out or can carve out for itself? So our plan for developing the creative industry starts with a one-year roadmap. And our strategic focus for 2023 is as follows. Firstly, research, policy, and legislation. We need to ensure that we set the platform for harnessing the potential of the sector. And it will start with first understanding what is happening organically in the space, developing the relevant policies and legislation to support the growth of the sector. It also includes raising the awareness and building a profile for the creative industries. A lot of persons think of the creative industries as hobbies. It is much more than that. And so we need to educate the public about the creative industries, what it is, what jobs are available, what opportunities are available, so that every child entering school can see the creative industries as a career path. Far too often, we find creatives who have been successful by chance. All right, they realize they have a creative passion 10 years into their career, 5 years into the career. We can't leave the development of our people to chance. And so we need to create a structured way for nurturing that creative talent from infancy right up to the point where they are able to enter the workforce. Of course, we can never build anything without building strong institutions. And one of our focuses this year is to ensure we build the institutional framework to ensure that the work that is necessary to build the sector can happen. And we have already started this by establishing the Office of Creative Affairs, which will be the main administrative element of the creative industries. And finally, training and education. It's key, paramount. All right, and we certainly intend to embark on a series of education campaigns and programs to ensure that we upskill our people so that they can certainly be able to compete on the regional and international market and also create products and services that are viable on those market spaces. So a one-year roadmap looks something like this. Firstly, we established the Office of Creative Affairs, right? And as I mentioned, it is the main administrative home for the creative industries. It is the entity that's going to drive all the activities and programs that we outline. The second step was to host a national cultural and creative industry conference. We've called it a symposium now, but it has blossomed into something much bigger. All right, so we're here today at phase 2. Now, Mr. Etienne mentioned the objective of phase 2 is to really bring all the stakeholders together to discuss the vision for the sector. Where can we go with it? What do we need to do to enhance it? After the symposium or conference, we plan to engage on a mapping project. We want to understand what is the organic activity that's happening within the creative industries. How many creatives are there? What's its contribution to GDP? How many jobs it creates? Right? What is the export potentially currently? I think everything starts with data, and you can't build any strong institution, strong program, or strong economy without first understanding the data of it. So this is going to be a 2 to 3 month exercise where we do a deep dive into understanding Grenada's organic creative activities. From that deep dive, we are going to develop what we call a national cultural and creative industry policy and 5 to 10 year strategy. That strategy is going to include the input from all of you in this room. All right, it's going to be a couple months developing this project, but at the end of it, we should have a very clear roadmap, a clear idea and clear strategies as to how we will go about developing every sector: film, music, visual arts, dance, theater. All right, so I'm calling on every person here to ensure that they make themselves available for the ideation sessions that will happen as we develop this policy and strategy. Finally, the output at the end of this year is the establishment of a statutory body that will drive the activities defined in the strategy. Already, I have recognized that the current institutional framework that is set up is not sufficient or adequate to drive the creative economy. All right, and it needs to have a more lean and agile model where the organization can adapt as fast as the sector is evolving. And so it may not be necessarily under the Ministry of Economic Development and Planning, but its own statutory body with its own revenues and its own mandate to develop the creative sector. And that is the level of dedication we plan to give the sector. So the Office of Creative Affairs, as I mentioned, it is the administrative home of the creative industries, And we have outlined a very brief 10-point mandate. And this is going to be very important for everybody here. The first mandate of the Office of Creative Affairs is to create a favorable environment for increasing economic activities in the creative industry. Second mandate is to facilitate linkages between the creative industries and other sectors. There's an intimate relationship between the creative industries and tourism, creative industries and agriculture, creative industries and education, even manufacturing. And so we want to ensure that the Office of Creative Affairs can spot these linkages and establish a channel for them to be harnessed seamlessly. We also want to facilitate concessions and other economic incentives for the creative industry. And already our government has implemented a 100% concession for all registered creatives who want to bring in what we call tools of trade. We also will be focused on creating policies for the sector in line with our 2035 national sustainability goals and objectives. As I mentioned before, we plan to raise awareness about the creative industries, what it is, who should enter, how it's going to benefit our country. We certainly intend to build capacity of our creative entrepreneurs through training programs, seminars, and other developments. And we have some exciting announcements later on during the course of the conference, so stay tuned to that. We plan to establish and manage a creative industries registry and business networking platform. The idea of this registry is to be able to catalog all the creative players in Grenada and in the diaspora. All right, if I'm a filmmaker and I want to come into Grenada and I need a fashion designer, or I need a gaffer, or I need a creative director or videographer, where do I go to find that person? So this registry is going to act as a key tool to be able to identify each and every one of you, your skill sets, and position you for persons who are looking for your services. Additionally, we're going to add on a mentoring component to that business networking platform. We're still in the process of conceptualizing this, but I see so many persons from the diaspora here with a lot of expertise, and we plan to lean on them to be able to mentor our creators locally. All right, so this is going to work as a sort of an online platform where you can book a 15 minutes a slot with one of our mentors to ask questions. I had a few persons ask me once, how do you go about structuring contracts for art? There's a particular hotel who wants to buy their art, and they had no idea how to structure the deal. And so these avenues for mentorship and advice are key, so that our creators are not taken advantage of and can leapfrog into their business ventures. Funding is a key part of developing the sector, and we plan to certainly provide more funding opportunities for the creators. Already we have in our budget a $1.5 million budget to launch a business development fund for the creative practitioners in Grenada. We also plan to promote information about existing funding opportunities. Far too often I see funding opportunities out there, and when you check to see how many Grenadians applied, not very many, because they don't know about it. So we will certainly be that entity that will be able to catalog and distribute all those opportunities to ensure that our creatives harness those opportunities. Of course, we want to support the export of goods and services and continue ongoing research in the creative industries. So this really outlines our one-year roadmap. As I mentioned, it is focused on policy, focused on institutional building, focused on research, and focus on capacity building. I thank you for your time and look forward to the discussions as we go along.
Thank you so much, Mr. Romain. And in a nutshell, Mr. Romain said, support the arts. Sometimes we think of arts as the paintings, the theater, the film. It's more. Culinary arts, architecture, everything is in there. So Mr. Romain just said to support all aspects of the arts. Mr. Killer was nominated for something recently. You can't go to the big show, maybe you could cast your vote. Yeah? I see many people in the diaspora. Last evening I met Fee Noel, first time, so inspired. And I remember I used to do fashion design. I almost wore a hat this morning. It's in the car, so I will show you later, okay? And then I put on this jacket made by a local designer, Corsil Ross, big up yourself. I was sitting and standing next to a photographer, my neighbor. I didn't know this boy was into photography from so long. My neighbor. I looked over there and I see Mr. Killer, and I remember the first time I met Mr. Killer, you remember? Arts Festival. I mashed him up in the poetry competition. And then he didn't come back for the finals. Remember that? Norton Hall. I remember first time I met Mr. Killer. I'm so inspired today. It's an emotional day for me. The arts made me who I am today. I want to thank everyone who supports the local art and who supports everything that our artists and our local craftsmen do. I see writers in the audience, artists, photographers, dancers, singers. And I see people who support. I see a young man in the audience. In 2015, I hosted a monologue competition. I had no sponsorship. And I decided to put it out there. I just sent out a WhatsApp. And this young man sponsored all the trophies. Thank you, Mr. James. I could stand here and talk and talk and talk and talk about all the moments that I've been inspired and people you here have been inspired. Salome Lawrence. I met your son. He came to one of my drama camps. I did not know you were such a big artist. Support our locals because they, in turn, we support each other. Support each other. And make sure you are a good example for the children, the youth that are coming up. And I think that is important to remember. The youth, they're looking on. Well, thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here this morning. I'm going to move on because I could stand here, like I said, I'm an actress, a talker. I'm making up lines to see this morning. The Caribbean Development Bank of Latin America aims to promote sustainable development and integration of the region and is committed to providing and improving the quality of life of all Latin Americans and Caribbean people. Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged to have in our presence this morning Dr. Stacy Richards Kennedy, Regional Manager for the Caribbean CAF Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean. Let us welcome Dr. Stacy Richards Kennedy as she makes some remarks.
Thank you very much, Neela. I feel your passion, and I'm very moved. Let me start off by recognizing our Acting Governor General, Honorable Prime Minister, ministers, and other distinguished representatives present today. I stand firmly on the protocol that has already been established. Warm greetings to all of you. It is my distinct pleasure to bring greetings on behalf of the Executive President of CAF, Mr. Sergio Diaz-Granados, who has sent greetings and best wishes to all participants for a successful conference. CAF, the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, is extremely proud to be the lead sponsor for this inaugural conference and landmark symposium focusing on unleashing Grenada's creative potential through the cultural industries. Permit me at the onset to congratulate the Honorable Prime Minister, Dickon Mitchell, for his vision and astute leadership. I had the honor of meeting Prime Minister Mitchell at the CARICOM Heads of Government meeting in Nassau in February and heard firsthand of the very interesting multi-sectoral development priorities of the government of Grenada. And during a recent World Bank IMF Spring meeting, our CAF President and I also met with the Honorable Minister Lennox Andrews, and we discussed more specifically Grenada's vision for the cultural and creative industries as an impetus for economic and social development. The vision was bold and backed the government's commitment, enthusiasm, and drive. As a multilateral development bank that prides itself on being agile and responsive to the needs of countries across Latin America and the Caribbean, CAF immediately committed to supporting Grenada with this pioneering initiative. Today's conference will not only lead to policies and actions that will have an impact on the economic thrust and overall well-being of the citizens of Grenada, it will also impact those who visit your shores, as well as those who access Grenada's cultural products and services remotely through the use of digital technologies. Moreover, the decisions arising from the important discussions that take place over the next 2 days will have a ripple effect across the entire Caribbean region. CAF is very pleased to support these efforts and to be accompanying Grenada and the rest of the region on this journey as we write a new chapter on the development of cultural industries as a vehicle for economic prosperity and social well-being. As a multilateral development bank, CAF is well positioned to play a catalytic role in multiplying and accelerating the investments in the creative industries, not only as a key driver of the regional economy, but as an enabler for achieving the sustainable development goals through innovative approaches. For those of you who are not familiar with CAF, we are a homegrown regional development bank whose shareholder countries are from Latin America and the Caribbean. The acronym CAF comes from the Spanish name Corporación Andina de Fomento, and the organization was formed some 53 years ago by 5 Andean countries in South America and has since expanded to include 21 member countries across both Latin America and the Caribbean. We are therefore a bank that is owned by Latin America and the Caribbean for Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also distinguish ourselves as being agile, client-focused, and flexible in our approach to supporting the development priorities of our member countries. Importantly, however, CAF is unique in that at the core of this development bank is a commitment to strengthening regional integration and sustainable development. Regional integration between Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as regional integration within the Caribbean. And as you know, most development issues require a collective regional approach and innovative financing instruments to effectively address them. Last year, CAF's board approved a capital increase of $7 billion, which was the largest in the history of CAF, and a demonstration of the confidence of CAF's shareholder countries in the strategic direction that the bank has been forging. This will enable CAF to double its portfolio of investments in Latin America and the Caribbean to US $60 billion by 2030. As the Green Bank for the region, we have also pledged to commit $25 billion for climate financing, roughly 40% of our approved investments by 2026. In November last year, a regional management office for the Caribbean was officially launched and is based in Port of Spain, Trinidad, bringing CAF even closer to the Caribbean and expanding our development assistance to the OECS. And let me recognize our Director General, Dr. Didicus Jules, and also to all CARICOM member countries. With regard to the creative and cultural industries globally, studies have reflected, and we've heard earlier, that the orange economy, as it is sometimes called, employs nearly 50 million people and generated over $2 trillion in revenue. Across our Caribbean landscape, CAF recognizes the important multiplier effect and immense potential of this diverse sector and is prioritizing support for such projects in keeping with our commitment to assist our member countries with revitalizing their economies and recovering quickly from the fiscal challenges that were precipitated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what is CAF's approach to development and promotion of creative and cultural industries? The overarching goal is to work with member countries to strengthen cultural and creative activities, agents, sectors, and capacities from a broad perspective that includes both the generation of economic growth and the protection of its social and environmental value. This includes building creative capacities, supporting tangible and intangible heritage, and cultural diversity as conduits for building more resilient, inclusive, sustainable, productive, and competitive countries. It means promoting urban and local development through culture, through creativity, through digital technologies, infrastructure, tourism development, manufacturing, and other related services. And importantly, through access to financing. It means building the capacity of local creatives, supporting interventions that will encourage innovation, youth engagement, and social cohesion, as well as urban regeneration through the revitalization of cultural heritage and infrastructure projects. CAF recognizes the creativity and cultural expressions that are synonymous with the Caribbean. This is a region that has been internationally recognized for our carnivals, jazz festivals, wide range of musical art forms, from reggae and dancehall to soca, calypso, extempo, compa, salsa, puta, bouillon, dennery segment, and so many others. We are a region whose literary contributions have been recognized through our internationally acclaimed writers, including 2 Nobel laureates for literature, a region that pools resources in spite of our challenges and fiscal constraints to host the Caribbean Festival of Arts, CARIFESTA, in different CARICOM countries. A region also known for our storytellers, spoken word poets, and folklorists like Paul Keynes Douglas and Louise Bennett, some of my personal favorites. The Caribbean story has been and continues to be told through the cultural expressions of our diverse peoples, and importantly, these cultural expressions have, for decades, provided an important platform to amplify the voice of the marginalized and those calling for human rights, equality, and social justice. Just think of the extensive reach and profound impact of the many songs produced by Bob Marley, which have transcended time, space, and geographic regions, race, ethnicity, and languages. It is truly phenomenal. And CAF recognizes the challenges that have been traditionally faced with nurturing a thriving ecosystem for creative and cultural industries, particularly in small, disparate islands such as those in the Caribbean. The importance of data gathering and analysis, as we have heard from Mr. Romain, to inform resource allocation and decision making. The need for increased attention to intellectual property, arts education and training, e-commerce platforms, and funding for entrepreneurs and startup companies, not to mention the need to overcome challenges posed by small size and scale through considering the orange economy from a regional perspective. Distinguished participants, CAF's participation in this conference goes beyond that of a sponsor. We will be here with you all 3 days, and we are committed as a development partner and looking forward to taking the next important steps with you to bolster your creative ideas and energy with access to development financing, with a view to strengthening the national and regional ecosystem for cultural industries to flourish here in Grenada and across the Caribbean. I am confident that this conference will pave the way for greater national and regional cooperation around important principles for the development of cultural industries. Know that CAF will continue to be a trusted and reliable partner as we advance on this collective journey together. I close by reiterating my gratitude to Prime Minister Mitchell, Minister Andrews, Mr. Romain, and all of the dedicated and hardworking staff who have helped to put this wonderful conference together. I thank you.
I hearing Mr. PMOI. What I hear, a kind of smiling, a glad, a smiling. See, all of that could work. Mr. PMOI. What I hear, all I want to sing it for me. Y'all had a lovely singing voice during the anthem. There we go. 2, 3. Mr. PMOI. What I hear, kind of smiling. What I hear, kind of smiling. Creative and, oh, beautiful. Hey. Listen, I need to call up Ollie on stage. Minister, yeah? Come on, sing a shotney. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank the shotneys, our masqueraders. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I want to thank also Dr. Stacy Richards Kennedy. I was listening to your speech, and I didn't find I heard jab jab. You find she heard, Ollie, she said jab jab? And I sit down there and I say, I didn't find this lady say jab jab. Them Grenadians bad for the jab jab. Hello? I didn't hear she say oil long too, Senator. Listen, in Greens, eh? Them jab, they bad for, I see some, look, I can point. Lord, look, some jab jab. They're staring at me. Listen. Write it down quick. Write it down in your speech. I'll call you back. Make sure you say jab jab. Right? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're moving on. At this point, we want to welcome our Prime Minister of Grenada. Oh yeah, I heard the clap. Listen, some of all in this audience. I'm going to bring the man on first now. Oh, they can clap. Ladies and gentlemen, to do the keynote address, our Prime Minister, the Honorable Deacon Mitchell.
Good morning and thank you, Neela. I don't know if it's fair to me to speak after the creatives. For one, Neela could ad lib as she goes along. She can act. Mr. Romain, I noticed in his speech had all his fancy stuff, PowerPoint presentation. And I guess I'm just a politician, so you'd have to bear with me. It is only a speech. And I have a history sometimes, like my dear colleague, of messing up the protocol list. So let me take my time and making sure that I read what is before me. And I want to start by recognizing Her Excellency, our Acting Governor General and President of the Senate, Dr. the Honorable Decima Williams, who I believe in her own right is a very, very good creative. So she's here both, I think, in her official, but also I believe in her personal capacity as well. I have to make sure that I skip myself. And then I go on to, and that reminds me, Mr. Roman from time to time does say to me, if politics fail, that I could be a good comic, which means I think he finds me funny, which means he laughs at me, not at the joke. But if that's all I have, then I will take that as a talent. So the Honorable Lennox Andrews, our Minister for the Creative Affairs, amongst many other things, the Honorable Attorney General, sorry, I will call it all the members of Cabinet, because I suppose we oftentimes don't get together like this. The Honorable Minister for Finance, Mr. Dennis Cornwall, the Honorable Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister Andal, the Honorable, I'm tempted to say Energy Bunny, but I'll give him his official title, the Honorable Minister for Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation, Honorable Andy Williams, and MP for the Great South, where we are gathered here today, the Honorable Minister Ron Redden, Minister for Culture, Youth and Sports, and I suppose the creative economy would be particularly important to our youth. Senator the Honorable Adrian Thomas, the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries, Forestry, and Mr. Orlando Romain, our advisor. Oh, okay. Thank you. You see, just as I said, I would almost mess up the protocol list. Yes, thank you. The Honorable Philip Telesford, Minister for Housing, Social, Community Development. Anybody else that I'm missing? No, we called the Honorable Attorney General early. Is the Minister for Education here? No, he isn't here. All right. But we'll hail up the Minister for Education nonetheless. I see Senator Cadet is here. Mr. Cadet, welcome. I was going to highlight Minister Romain, advisor to the Ministry for the Creative Economy, Director General of the OECS, Dr. Didicus Jules. I suppose I could say welcome home. To former members of Parliament who are here or who are viewing with us online, to distinguished presenters at this event over the next several days, to all of the creatives who are here and who are online, to representatives from the private sector, our special guests from the Caribbean and Latin America Development Bank, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you, and thank you for your sponsorship. All other specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to be here this morning to make brief remarks, nothing that is creative. As Minister Andrews alluded to, there's a famous quote by Victor Hugo, the great French novelist in the 19th century, which reads, and I quote, "There is nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come." The quote highlights the important fact that it is not merely the existence of an idea that makes it powerful, but rather the moment when that idea becomes ripe for implementation, when society is ready to embrace the idea and to make it a reality. It is this moment that the idea becomes a force that can move mountains. Today, May 10th, 2023, our time has come for new ideas. We have embarked on a season as a society, the season of the creative spirit. I believe that spirit is alive and well in every person in this room today, alive and well in every person who's viewing online, in one degree or another, passed down from our ancestors who used creativity as a mode of survival. I'm a proud product of the creative and resilient spirit of the community that I grew up in, observing the men and women of Petit Esperance in St. David's demonstrating creative ways to put bread on the table and to raise their families in trying circumstances. Their creativity found expressions in Saraka, in Susu, and in the maroon traditions of cooperation that traveled across the Atlantic with our enslaved foreparents. It was this spirit of creativity that was embedded in the DNA of our people and which enabled them to find solutions to the survival challenge they faced on a daily basis. As creatives, I encourage you to invoke this spirit and bring it to bear in your work as you hone your craft and embrace modern ways of reaching the market. Gird yourselves with the creative DNA of your ancestors and safeguard your unique view of the world. Today's event marks a milestone in my government's promise to pursue people-centered transformation, laying the foundation for resilience, empowerment, and growth. Culture and the creative economy were identified as one of the 6 priority areas in our medium-term action plan for the period 2023 to 2024. And today, this morning, and over the next several days, we are walking that walk, making our actions consistent with our declared policy. We must view today's event and the next several days within the broader context of the approach to governance that we have chosen, an approach that is bold, that is different. And indeed, this is the first time in our history that a conference of this kind is being held. Over the next 3 days, participants will have the chance to wrap their minds around key policy issues related to the entire creative industry's value chain, to include institutional support for this sector. But importantly, this gathering is about empowerment. You, the participants, should emerge from this exercise feeling stronger, feeling more confident in the creative path that you have chosen to walk in your life. By bringing together this room of creatives with all the key players in the ecosystem of the creative economy, there will be a cross-fertilization of ideas, and many creative flowers will bloom. New thinking will be embraced, and hopefully, we will walk away from these 3 days of conferencing richer in spirit and united in how we should pursue advancement of this important pillar in the transformation of Grenada. As you prepare to settle into your panel discussions and workshops, I challenge you to be honest with yourselves and to have an honest conversation about the role and your place in all of this. How will your participation in this conference help you to achieve your goals? Dare to ask yourselves and to take yourselves seriously and carve out a vision of where you want to go. I encourage all participants to embrace this opportunity to learn all that you can, acquire the skills and knowledge to become professionals, make connections through networking, and enlist the help of those who can give you a hand up. Internalize the reality. Internalize the reality that you can make a living, and internalize the reality that you can become wealthy from your God-given talent. Understand well, however, that the creative industry is a career choice for talented but hard-working individuals. And it is not a program of government handouts. Government, through a regime of concessions and other incentives, as well as training programs and other forms of institutional support, will invest in you. This country, your country, Grenada, will invest its tax dollars in you, but you will have an obligation to give Grenada a return on its investment. In other words, we ask that you work with us because we are working with you. Your success will be Grenada's success. Permit me to say a few words to corporate Grenada. Colleagues, the investment in the creative economy is a national initiative, and successful national initiatives require partnerships. I'm therefore inviting our partners in the private sector to come on board. The creative sector is worthy of your financial support, and it is worthy of your financial investment. This sector represents exciting possibilities for economic diversification, foreign exchange earnings, and gross domestic product growth. Positives for the private sector and for Grenada overall. We therefore look forward to actively partnering with you in the private sector in supporting Grenada's creative economy. The policy interventions that we are contemplating will involve initiatives not just with the private sector, but also with a wide cross-section of stakeholders. Our Office of Creative Affairs will need to work in tandem with the Grenada Cultural Foundation, the Department of Culture, the Grenada Tourism Authority, the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, cultural industry associations, whether in visual or performing arts, film or fashion, as well as with other national bodies to ensure partnership and ownership. In our quest to build our creative economy, we also understand the need to reach out beyond the shores of Grenada. We need to hold hands and create synergies with our brothers and sisters across the region, with a view to learning from their experiences and best practices where possible. My administration is prepared to collaborate with other regional governments to create a common enabling regional environment for the creative industries. We are already working to improve the harmonization, simplification, and implementation of intra-regional trade measures aimed at deepening our regional market and making it easier for the movement of cultural workers and equipment, as well as expanding the list of professionals classified as cultural workers. We will continue to collaborate with our regional partners to conduct joint negotiations aimed at strengthening global market access for Caribbean cultural products. Colleagues, we have already seen what is possible. We should not be afraid to have big dreams. Someone once said that if our dreams are not frightening us, we are not dreaming big enough. Grenada is a branch from the tree of Caribbean civilization. We come from a tree of greatness. Our scholars have earned global acclaim for their intellect. Our athletes are world leaders. Our entertainers have broken into markets throughout the world. We have an obligation to spot and nurture the specially gifted amongst us. The next Sabrina Francis could be the little girl singing in the church choir in Riversally or Marquis or Windsor Forest. The next Mr. Killer could be the little boy jumping off the bus in Grand Roy. As we look around Grenada, we need to be aware that there are incubation points of greatness in some of the humblest and most overlooked places. We must develop the intellectual and institutional capacity to raise the gifted and talented amongst us. So to those of you who are breaking through barriers and doing well, I challenge you to look back and take others along with you as you strive to reach new frontiers. It is all about networking and collaboration. It is all about teamwork. Step out of your silos and build critical mass. Strengthen your associations and talk and walk with us. This is a time for bold, innovative approaches. Our ancestors who embraced the spirit of Saraka, Susu, and Maroon did not bequeath to us a spirit of timidity. Let your work be fresh, authentic, Grenadian. If you are a writer, do not be afraid to tell your Grenadian stories. If you are a fashion designer or a visual artist, do not be afraid to stamp Grenadian symbols on your creations. Do not win by losing yourself. Above all, do not be daunted if your initial attempts are not successful. Initial failure is often part of the learning curve to success. If you fall down, then you owe it to yourself to get up, dust yourself off, and as the dancehall artist would say, wheel and come again. I wish to conclude by congratulating the Office of the Creative Affairs, the Conference Planning Committee, and all of you who have put in the arduous work of staging this conference. I want to thank all participants, especially those of you who have come from overseas to share their vast experience and knowledge with us. On my own behalf, on behalf of the government of Grenada and the people of Grenada, I wish you success in the deliberations. I challenge you to go bold, to go brave, to embrace your creative spirit, and to unleash. Thank you.
When we get excited, all things break and fall, and I hope it still works, sir. Thank you so much, Honorable Prime Minister. Such a profound, thank you, officer. Such a profound keynote address. The Prime Minister was calling out the list of senators and ministers, and he did say sometimes he messes up. And I think he called you Mr. Cadet. So I want to recognize our senator, Senator Nealon Franklin, yeah? Look, I got you, sir, I got you. I got you. I got you. I want to make a special announcement for vehicles PAN 34 and vehicle number P1752. You might be getting clamped, your car might be on fire, you might be blocking somebody's driveway. I'm not sure, but you need to move your vehicles immediately. If it's clamped, that's what, 350? If you're blocking somebody's driveway, you might have a slashed tire. So a lot of things might be in play here. So if you're the driver of PAN 34 or the driver of P1752, move your car. Thank you again, Honorable Prime Minister. And I'd like to say a special thank you to Mr. Ricardo Keynes Douglas. He is behind today's opening ceremony. So I want to make sure always that we big up our creatives, that we pay homage to those who who are putting things in place for us, and these are our mentors. Mr. Keynes Douglas, thank you so much for your service to Grenada. We are moving right along, and I want to just make some final remarks, and then I want to invite you to take a short break. So Unleash, again, is not just about knowledge sharing and networking. It is a celebration of the incredible talent that resides right here in Grenada and beyond. It is an opportunity to showcase the extraordinary work of our local artists, designers, and to embrace diversity and to foster a sense of unity and collaboration. There are a lot of things happening, film festivals, dance festivals coming up, and you're going to learn a lot more about that throughout our conference this week. I urge you, ladies and gentlemen, to seize this moment, to embrace the possibilities that lie ahead, and to unleash your creativity in the purest form. Together, let us ignite a spark of creativity that will illuminate our path towards a vibrant and sustainable creative economy. Let us embrace the power of collaboration, harness the potential of innovation, and pave the way for the future where creativity knows no bounds. I don't want to sound too much like a politician. I find I get in there a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this remarkable journey today. Let us now declare Unleash officially open. I want to let you know that they told me 15 minutes, but I'm telling you, you only have 10 minutes. Because I know Grenadians, I know Caribbean people are always late. So we have a short break for 10 minutes, and we'll get right back here for another keynote presentation, by Dr. Keith Nurse. Ladies and gentlemen, he's a director at heart.
Bowels of the ocean floor, earth with wind, and wind with fire exploding with awesome fury, and the mighty seas were parted. Just like that, we were on. Volcanic lava, liquid and fluid. Volcanic rock, rich and resilient and ready to sustain life.
And winged creatures of the air rained seeds upon the rock, and the seeds took root and grew. Ginger lilies, lantanas, petunias, heliconias, poinsettias, bougainvilleas.
And stately palm trees sprung up along the rocky bays and sandy beaches. And the rainforest grew up in the hills beyond our reaches.
And so our rock became paradise, with flowers and trees and birds and bees and people, blessed and highly flavored people, olive, vanilla, and chocolate mixes, people searching for wealth, survival, and power, and other types of fixes.
And the people on the rock were blended in a stew. The Caribbean pepper pot, the Grenadian callaloo. And people brought stories and made stories, protagonists, antagonists woven into the narrative of the people. Little did they know that their mere existence was clay to sculpt a culture, birth tradition, give meaning to motion and life to a nation, inspiration.
Look around. What we lack in size, we pack in imagination. Imagination, our untapped resource. We source from outside what we have innately within.
But I can feel something coming. Something is coming. Something is about to start. A spark is all we need to unleash this fire.
From the minds of the creative,
Minds given by the Creator,
infused with color and song,
ideas and rhyme,
perfected with time,
aged wine,
blended with emotion and soul.
and stories untold, an intoxicating concoction.
Our market, the world. You sound engineer for my microphone. I really need to invest in my own microphone. Come to events with my microphone and just start talking in the audience. And yes, a costume change was needed. Scene 2. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming back. I hope you enjoyed your tea. We had a lovely tea break, and we want to get the ball rolling again. Dr. Nurse? Dr. Keith Nurse is one of the pioneers of research on the cultural and creative industries in the developing world. He has published several path-breaking studies on the economics, trade, and development impact of the creative sector for regional and international organizations around the world. He has formerly served at the University of the West Indies as the World Trade Organization chair and has worked as senior economist and advisor on structural policies and innovation unit at the OECD Development Center in Paris. He serves on the Executive Bureau of the UN Committee for Development Policy, a subsidiary body of the United Nations Economic and Social Council. He is a former member of the Economic Development Advisory Board, from the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce, well, I just introduced another keynote address, and this time it will be presented by Dr. Eric Nurse. Let's welcome him.
Good morning to you all. I'm going to ask that I be allowed to adopt all of the protocols that have been observed this morning. I'm fully cognizant that I'm here after the opening ceremony, quite an excellent opening ceremony, if I may say so. So kudos to the organizers. I would also like to say that I was particularly impressed that the organizers have chosen to use the term unleash. In that the word unleash is not a passive term. It suggests ambition, but it also suggests that Grenada is prepared to be audacious. And for that, Grenada and the people of Grenada need to be given a round of applause. I want to thank, the Minister, Minister Andrews, for, setting the stage. In fact, last night over drinks, we were commenting on, the way in which we were both informed by a number of economists from the region and how our minds have been shaped. So in that regard, we share a lot in common. I'd also like to thank Mr. Orlando Romain for really setting the stage for putting this conference in context and also outlining a very well-defined strategy for Grenada. And Dr. Stacy Richards Kennedy, who's a former colleague of mine from UWI, was keen on emphasizing the importance of the ways in which the diversification of the Caribbean economy is an absolute necessity, and that there is a mechanism of financing that needs to be catered, not only for the creative industries, but for the region more generally. And then the Prime Minister. What a hard act to follow. It is rare, and I want to say this without fear of judgment, it is rare that I hear Caribbean politicians speak with such fervor and conviction. And so I really want to endorse much of what the Prime Minister has indicated, because in many respects, Caribbean society is actually depending on us to make this right. And so in his closing comments, when he talked about the importance of implementation, I nodded many times. Because if you look at the Caribbean experience, particularly in the last 20 to 30 years, our biggest challenge is that of implementation. In fact, I call it the implementation deficit disorder. Enough plans, and I've written a lot of them, lay on shelves or on hard drives, or in some instances can't be found anymore, except on my machine, with very detailed strategies for the creative sector. I see my good friend Alison Francis, who's a former colleague of mine as well. We've been talking about this stuff for at least 20 years. So I suppose that really dates me. In fact, I've been working on this stuff for close to 3 decades. When I first started, my colleagues at UWI thought I was crazy. And my recently friend from UWI, Justin Koo, who's speaking this evening, asked me last night, like, how did you get into this? And also he asked, well, why did you get into this? It's a very simple explanation. The creative sector is one of the areas where the Caribbean has both competitive advantage as well as comparative advantage. In many other sectors, because my PhD was on the manufacturing sector, it's very difficult for small economies to be very competitive in generic manufacturing. In fact, if you look at the data, much of what we can produce in Latin America and the Caribbean in the manufacturing sector can be outcompeted by China. In fact, it's estimated that 90% of what we produce in the manufacturing sector could be outcompeted by China and shipped here, landed at a cheaper cost. So, where do we go? What's the pathway? Where is the value added that we can contribute? And if you look at Latin America and the Caribbean, and the data specifically for the Caribbean, our share of global value added and global manufacturing value added have declined considerably in the last 3 decades. So the Caribbean is faced with a multiple set of crises. So last week, for example, I was talking about things like the just transition, loss and damage, funding. This week I'm talking about creative industries. They all have one thing in common, which is that we need to find mechanisms to advance sustainable development. The creative sector is critical to facilitate this process of sustainable development in 2 key areas. One, the creative economy is not a standalone economy. It flows into other aspects of our economy. It sharpens the competitiveness in tourism, in manufacturing, and you name it, by creating that value addition in creativity. And the second component of the sustainable dimension is that how are you going to sell sustainable development to the world and society if not through creative industries? Where's the message going to come from? The radio, the TV, the ads. It's all going to be produced by creatives. So there's no sustainable development agenda without creating a framework for the creative industries is a critical component. So in fact, in one of my most famous papers, I entitled Culture as the fourth and central pillar of sustainable development. Okay, enough said. I know that I'm following on the hard act of the Prime Minister, but I also know that I am just before lunch. So in effect, I am sandwiched between two very difficult imperatives. I'm going to go through my presentation very quickly, and I'm going to cut through some of the slides, and then open it up for some Q&A, debate, and so on. Because I think you as an audience have been very patient, and I don't want to stretch your kindness and your consideration too far. So I was asked to make a presentation on making a case for the creative industries in the Caribbean. And I've changed my title to Unleashing the Creative Economy in the Caribbean. You can understand why. So, it must have been about 10 years ago. I was in China. I was invited to a conference on the creative economy. And we were being hosted by John Hawkins, who coined not only the term creative economy, but he also coined the term orange economy, which was referred to by our CAF representative earlier. What was striking about that meeting was two key things. One, the importance that the Chinese government had put into the creative economy. They had hired Mr. Hawkins, and he had been working with them for several years to build out a strategy for the creative economy. If you fast track, and this is when I was doing work in Paris for the OECD, I had to oversee the research on China, and particularly the city of Shenzhen. Shenzhen accounts for somewhere between 20 to 25% of the export earnings of China. 50 years ago, Shenzhen was a fishing village with 40,000 people, 50,000 people. Now it's a population of 18 million. 10% of the exports from Shenzhen is creative industries. All the companies are there. Huawei, Tencent, you know them. Now, the thing about it is that the Chinese also were very clear. They wanted to build upon their strengths. So, Chinese culture was going to be the linchpin of that strategy, where they would also bring in foreigners, like Mr. Hawkins and whoever else was skilled, to facilitate. What has happened in that time frame, only 10 years ago, is the rapid rise of the digital creative economy. Everything has gone digital, and it's escalating. So, 2 years ago, I published a paper on digital creative economy and blockchains. Wow. Now, non-fungible tokens was the big thing in the last year or so. And now there's a lot of debate about AI and how that's going to impact on the creative industries. So, does it make any sense to be a visual artist? Well, I have a son who's going to go off to university to study visual arts, and I'm looking at my bank account and thinking, will this be a worthy investment? My bet is that, I hope my son is listening. Yeah, my bet is that he will be a great visual artist and create work of high levels of authenticity, and so that ChatGPT can't copy it. The issue, though, is that for many developing countries, the challenge is that we are still thinking of the creative economy in an old framework. So in the good old days, when I first started working on this, creative industries were basically cultural industries. So the arts, plus some other additional areas like broadcasting, advertising, and so on. Well, John Hawkins says, well, it's that plus. So the importance of intellectual property has been brought into the equation to a greater degree. And it's really an important dimension of the sector. Fast track to the current context, what we have is a scenario where the creative economy is driven by digital assets and has become increasingly a fintech industry. So, whereas we were thinking, well, all we have to do is train some artists and we'll be all right, create some arts institutions, we'll be all right, the answer to that is no. That ship has already sailed. If you are not creating people to be digital entrepreneurs and people who know how to manage digital assets on fintech platforms, you are out of the game. And so, to quote one of my favorite authors and collaborators, Carlota Perez, she says that development is a moving target. So if you are in standstill, it means that you're fallen behind. So even when you think you're innovating and coming up with something new, what matters is where you are relative to where the rest of the world is. And in this regard, the Caribbean is pretty far behind. So last year, I made a presentation talking about TikTok. So TikTok is worth more than the 8 top airlines in the world combined. It's bigger than YouTube, several times bigger than YouTube, and it's several times bigger than Google. And all in the space of a few years. When I first started looking at TikTok, I was like, seeing my kids doing funny dances. I'm like, what's going on here? Huh? I couldn't believe it. Look at TikTok. TikTok has a valuation, this is from last year, 400 billion. It's probably exceeded that now. It's the largest company on planet Earth. Doing what? Distributing creative content, much of it user-generated. So, Orlando did a really good job this morning of presenting what are the key elements of the creative economy in terms of the sectors. In my research, what I do is I adopt a principle called follow the money principle. Because if you look at sectors, you may miss what is the emerging sector. So what I do is I focus on where is the money. And the money is being earned and generated in 5 key areas, in goods, creative good. So my suit, what's her name? Miss Etienne was referring to her outfit being produced by a designer here in St. Lucia. That's a creative good. Huh? Did I say St. Lucia? Yes. Did it, because that's a Freudian slip. I used to work in St. Lucia. So that's for my St. Lucian brethren. Yeah. So the creative good. The designer that created or designed the jacket, I presume it's a jacket, would generate services. So design services is another component. Now, if that designer is now producing on a scale and patents the work, the particular design cut, then that's intellectual property. And if you run a fashion festival where this particular jacket is featured, now it's part of the experience economy. And last but not least, if you then create that jacket and put it into a non-fungible token, you're now entering the data economy. And as they say, data is the new oil. The thing about the creative sector is that it doesn't produce final goods and or services. So when I was taught economics at secondary school and at university, the premise of the widget economy was the framework by which we understood the world. That was a heuristic device that we were using. That notion is out the window and has been out the window for a long time. We're still teaching people widget economics when the world has shifted in multiple ways. So, the creative economy is a circular economy. A good can generate a service can generate intellectual property, experiences, and earn data, or what we call data monetization. So, what are the key messages? So, the digital economy creates multiple income streams that have strong potential for economic and trade diversification in countries like our own. It also creates new forms of employment and entrepreneurship. So, for example, particularly for the youth, and you have to forgive me, I experienced some of this new economy through my children. So every so often I see a strange car pulling up to our house and somebody dropping out and making a message, and my children walking out the door and paying somebody money for something. I've just been told that there's an emergency for two vehicles, PAV 763 and PAE 827. You should move your car very quickly. So you now have a whole cadre of young people who are producing stuff at home, have their stuff posted on Instagram, have delivery mechanisms, and collection mechanisms. And that's now called the creator economy, which is a subset of the creative economy. So we now have people doing all kinds of work. Gig economy work, if you want to call it that. Freelancing work, if you want to call it. But there's a whole new dynamic taking place in the economy that has nothing to do with the formal job economy as we used to conceive it. And young people understand this almost intuitively. So we need to find a mechanism to elevate this to the next level. So what I want to do in the next few slides is talk a bit more about that. Some of this was already mentioned by previous speakers. I'm not going to talk about all the successes we've had in the Caribbean. These successes are only good if we use them as a platform. If they are in the dustbin of history, they are very little use to us. So how are we using our past successes as a mechanism to go to the next level is what the issue is at hand. If you look at the data for the Caribbean and for wider Latin America and the Caribbean, our share of world exports of cultural and recreational services is not keeping pace with the global economy. The major earners in this sector are Europe and Asia. And the data for Asia, 70% of that is China. In fact, if you look at the data for China, China exports $55 billion worth of creative goods and only imports $5 billion. It's one of the sectors where China has the greatest trade surplus. Whereas in our economies, we import a lot of creative content, particularly goods, but also services and intellectual property. And in Latin America, we are lagging behind. Even though, if you ask anyone in the world, what are the top 10 artists? What are the top 10 genres of music, for example? Latin America and the Caribbean will show up in prominence in those top 10. But that does not translate into earnings in the creative economy. So for example, I did a study on Mauritius. And in the data, Mauritius was exporting tons of books. So I went to the Ministry of Culture and I said, well, who are these Mauritian authors that are doing so well? And they said, no, we don't have any successful international authors. We have a book publishing industry. But it's basically a manufacturing sector. And we are manufacturing the books mostly for Africa. My last trip to Mauritius was very interesting. The Minister for Trade was making a presentation. And he said something that I will never forget. He said, we are no longer in the clothing and textile industry. We are moving into the fashion industry. I was like, wow. So Mauritius exports a lot of textiles and clothing, and they've come to realize that that has low value added. And that they were pivoting towards a higher value added sector based on the fashion industry, where you earn from design services, you earn from intellectual property, you can generate fashion festivals, and so be part of the experience economy, and potentially earn data. Now, if you look at the information that we have about the contribution of this sector to the Caribbean economy, it's not insubstantial. The best analysis that we have that gives the most concise and consistent data is the World Intellectual Property Organization's analysis of the copyright sector. So for example, in the United States, the copyright sector accounts for 11% of GDP. That's bigger than the manufacturing sector. That's bigger than the arms sector. It's bigger than the pharmaceutical sector in the United States. And in our economies, it ranges somewhere between, in a place like St. Lucia, close to 7% of GDP, to 2 to 3% of GDP in countries like Dominica. So Grenada is somewhere in the middle. This is quite significant. And what it means is it includes broadcasting. So how many radio stations do you have? Television stations, newspapers. But it also includes the work of our cultural entrepreneurs or creative entrepreneurs. And that we are not capturing well enough. So if you look at the data we have for the Caribbean, much of it is not a pretty sight. So the data on creative goods exports for 5 countries, this is from a few years ago, but it hasn't changed much. In fact, our exports, particularly to Europe, declined considerably after we signed the Economic Partnership Agreement with Europe. Why? Because it coincided with the global economic downturn, but it also coincided with another phenomenon, which is the digitization of creative content. So that from 2007, 2008, the dematerialization of creative content moved at a rapid speed. This is reflected in how, for example, data is collected on the music industry. So if you look at it, in the good old days, you just used to count, the goods. So CDs, records, tapes, remember those? Yeah. But now you're counting track downloads, full album downloads, other downloads, subscription services, ad support, video streams, total streaming, mobile penetration, etc., etc. In fact, there are 120 different ways to monetize music. One of them is collections, what we call royalty collections. And again, what you see is that Latin America and the Caribbean only accounts for 5%, whereas Asia Pacific is 15%, North America is 23%, Europe is 56%. The reason why Europe shows up so high is because, and this is, if you look at the royalty statement for any artist from the Caribbean that earns most of their royalty income in Europe, European copyright societies value copyright at a higher rate than in the United States, almost twice to 3 times as high. And so that's why they earn a lot. In fact, the difference between Europe and the developing world in terms of monetizing copyright is the tune to almost 40 to 50 times higher per person. So each person in Europe is consuming and paying for copyright at a rate of 40 to 50 times higher than in the developing world. So it means there's a lot of room for us to raise the value of our copyright. And this is just data showing the impact of COVID, which I won't go into. Except to say, what is one of the key lessons we've learned from COVID is that the digital economy is here to stay. Not only that it is here to stay, it is going to be the main mechanism by which we consume content, but also the main means by which we will be educating our children. So the creative economy is now clashing or becoming fully absorbed into the education economy. Trinidad and Tobago, where I'm from, has one of the festivals in the world that generates the highest return on investment. And if you noted, the Prime Minister, when he was concluding his statements, talked about the return on investment, that he's not going to be talking to people about handouts. If that is the case, then you need to generate the data to make the case and say, Mr. Prime Minister, for this investment, this is our expected return on investment. Without that, it will be very difficult. And trust me, I've sat across the table from many a prime minister in the Caribbean. But it's the way you measure that matters. So for example, Bob Marley and Bob Marley's catalog makes him one of the richest dead men. I know that sounds almost like an oxymoron. But Forbes magazine annually calculates the earnings of dead artists. And Bob Marley is always in the top 10. Why? I mean, from t-shirts to mugs to shoes, they've been merchandising Bob Marley's image, but it's also his back catalog of music. It generates significant earnings every year to the tune of almost $30 million. And in fact, the estate of Bob Marley is worth in hundreds of millions. Grenada now, Spice Mass. I actually did an economic impact assessment of Grenada's Spice Mass back in 2011. And back then, we identified, even when we had very little data and a conservative estimate, that the return on investment on the festival was 110%. We also found that the private sector support for the festival was 150% of what the government had put in. Mind you, a lot of that was not just cash, it was also in-kind services. What we also found is that the satisfaction level for both visitors and for attendees of the festival were very high. To compare with the World Creole Music Festival in Dominica, which I've also done a study on, Trinidad Carnival, St. Kitts Music Festival. I've done studies on all of them. So, where do we go? This is a diagram that I've been using for the last few years. In fact, it was published in a study that we did for CARICOM when I was working at UWI as the World Trade Organization chair. So that's a few years now, 5 or 6 years ago. And what we were suggesting is a very, I would call it, sophisticated mechanism for investing in the creative sector to do 2 things: service the growth of creative entrepreneurship, but also service digital entrepreneurship. and the two need to go hand in hand. From crowdfunding to angel investing, debt and equity financing, trade financing, IP financing, IP branding are all mechanisms that can be leveraged to finance the sector. As it now stands, we think only in very narrow terms about financing. So we need to innovate in how we finance the sector. Another component of this diagram is how do you leverage capabilities in the sector. Now, not all firms or not all creative entrepreneurs are at the same level. So what we suggested is you need to create startup camps for early stage entrepreneurs. Those who move beyond that create clusters, then incubators, accelerators, and you create a market integration program. I've been doing this with one of the companies I'm the chair of, which is Caribbean Tales. We've been in operation for 15 years now. We operate in Toronto, we're in London, we're in New York, and we're in the Caribbean. But I see this happening with other players. I just came from the Boca Slit Festival in Trinidad. And if you look at the success of the Boca Slit Festival, it has generated a whole cadre of young authors, not only from Trinidad and Tobago, but of across the region. So festivalization is a really important strategy for generating growth in the creative economy, and particularly in the youth economy. Key to this, of course, is intellectual property value capture. And what do I mean by that? The creative sector generates intellectual property in multiple spheres. It's not just copyright. It could be patents if it's a manufactured good, but it also generates what we call geographical indications. And so you could then tie that into some of your agro-processing. For example, Marshall Montano has a chocolate that he's selling. So he's using his intellectual property branding as part of that process. So I'm arguing that festivalization is a really important branding strategy for the Caribbean, and why so? This is one of our strengths. It means that people have to come to us on our terms. And who doesn't want to come to the Caribbean to visit? Especially when it's particularly cold up north. But there's another component to this. Not just our carnivals and our jazz festivals and music festivals. You also want to bring people for very specialized sectors. So for example, if you go to Cuba, the Havana Biennale attracts 3,000 to 5,000 people. But these are the 3,000 to 5,000 most important people in the visual arts sector. Why do you think Cuba exports so much visual arts? It's not just that their artists are good, it's that there is a meeting place that all of the world's best and most influential people come to every year. And that's in Havana. Diaspora is something that the Prime Minister mentioned. It's a really important strategy for the region. Remittances outpaces FDI, or foreign direct investment, and aid by multiple levels. Why aren't we tying in our strategy to the diaspora to a greater degree? And last but not least, I'm an educator. So you know my last point has to be about education. So please forgive me. But we can't just be doing training for training's sake. We've been doing that ad nauseum for a long time with declining return on investment. So, at my college, which is the College for Science, Technology, and Applied Arts, we are pivoting. So we have our mainstay. We have 6 schools now. We've just introduced a school for the environment, circular economy, and sustainability. but we have created 6 upskilling academies, one of which is targeted at the creative sector, where we will be doing training, skills-based training, competency-based training, linked to an incubator where you get business coaching and facilitation, linked to an accelerator where there's seed financing. So now, people who come into the academy, the upskilling academy, are coming there not to get certified, but to explore the opportunities of their chosen sector. We need to ramp this out. And I can tell you, I've been a beneficiary of these kinds of services. There is nothing more important than having a business coach. It's worth more than the money. There's nothing more important than having someone who could network for you and get you into the right doors abroad. And there's nothing more important than having a champion at home and in the region who can make the policy change. This is what we need to do. And so when the Prime Minister talks about having an agenda for transformation that goes beyond the boundaries of Grenada, I almost said St. Lucia there for a moment, that goes beyond the boundaries of Grenada, we need to pick him up on it. Because none of our economies and societies are big enough to do this alone. There needs to be a regionalization strategy that is at the core. I want to leave the stage now or invite comments or questions if we do have any time. I know that time is against us. But I just wanted to conclude on that point, which is that the implementation agenda and reversing the implementation deficit disorder can only happen if we regionalize. Yes. So that's why my good friend, Dr. Didjicus Jules, and I, we've been talking about this ad nauseum. And the work that he's been doing at the OECS Secretariat is on this premise. We need to ramp it out across the whole region and to include Dominican Republic, Haiti, countries, Cuba, all of Central America. Because you go to Colombia and they talk about their Caribbean cities. And so we need to be thinking bigger than we are currently thinking. So, on that note, I would like to invite any questions or comments. I hear that there's a mic somewhere out there. I don't know how much time we have. Ms. Etienne, can you advise? 3 minutes. We have 3 minutes? So that's one question.
Dr. Jules seems to have a question. You can take the microphone in the middle, in the aisle. Or you can use your teacher voice.
Just to respond to Dr. Nurse's point about regionalization, he did indicate that that is where we'd like to go as the OECS. And it's very clear that in this brutally competitive world, no matter how well any individual country does, as a region, we are not going to go forward if we don't work together. So a lot of when I make my presentations later, you will see concretely what we are talking about. But there's a huge opportunity for us with that partnership with Africa that 5 of the OECS member states signed about 6 months ago in Barbados. And when we look at the opportunities in Africa, we are nothing compared to, even within CARICOM, we have to struggle to be heard and to make progress. And if we put ourselves in the context of Africa with the billions of people, we are microbes. So the idea of each going alone is untenable. However, there are huge opportunities, and I'll just give you one sneak fact. Rihanna, the Barbadian artist, is worth 1.9 billion US dollars. The economy of Barbados, the GDP of Barbados, is 4.1 billion US. If Rihanna were a currency, 3.5 Iriris equals the economy of Barbados. The question I want to leave to the creatives here is how many undiscovered Rihannas are there in the OECS, and whether Africa provides us with that opportunity.
3.5 Iriris equals what? How much in EC? Listen. Question from Eugene Gittins. Go ahead.
Dr. Lewis, I want to piggyback on the African question. I noticed in your slides you had the collection rates from royalties, I don't know if it's current or if it's a little backdated, as only 1%. And that was, especially with the rise of African music everywhere, you know, Afrobeat and everything. I'm a bit, that's a little bit confusing to me. If you could just explain that.
The question you must be asking is, which copyright society are these African artists registered with? So, you know, this is why there's a distinction between what you hear on the airwaves and what translates into economic flows.
Yes.
Remember, I started off my presentation by saying my methodology is follow the money. So, although Jamaica has more artists and more globally recognized artists than Trinidad and Tobago, the copyright income that Jamaica gets is a paltry fraction of that generated in Trinidad and Tobago.
It's true.
Because most Jamaican artists are either members of ASCAP, BMI, SESAC, and the ones in the UK, I can't remember, PRS, and in Germany and wherever. The money doesn't go back to Jamaica.
Yeah.
Okay, so whereas a large share of the artists in Trinidad and Tobago are registered with the Copyright Society in Trinidad and Tobago, which is COT. So, when you look at the data is a reflection not of what was on the airwaves, it's a reflection of what is collected in the various national territories.
One more question from our audience.
Hello, good day. My name is Callum Broadwaite, also known as Jules the Voice. I'm a chef, local artist, and also a manufacturer here in Grenada. My question is on manufacturing. We have a problem that we in this part of the world don't own a mechanism for intellectual properties when it comes to patenting, right? I went to the intellectual properties office some years ago asking for patents and where can I get it? And I was told that I have to either go to a European country or North America or Canada. Do you think it is feasible for this region to have our own mechanism where we can patent our own goods and services so we can send it out to the world?
Excellent question.
You should be asking Justin Koo that question. So if you go to his panel this evening, he will answer that far more effectively than I can. Not so, Justin? Yes. Good.
And that's a good response, a good getaway response as well.
But let me put it this way. I've done some work on this area because I do work on innovation and intellectual property. And just to put it in perspective, I did a study looking at all Caribbean countries, including the non-independent territories, from 1948 to 2016. And I calculated how much patents were registered by all Caribbean countries in this period. It is equivalent to as many patents that are registered in Singapore in 1 year. And Singapore is a small economy of 5 million people. But Singapore used to be like us. They are no longer like us. They invest in research and development. And they are now some of the global leaders with a small population compared to big countries. So it's not a function of size. It's a function of strategic intent. And just to bear with me.
Go ahead.
For 1 minute. 15 years ago, I had the good fortune of sitting in a workshop in Austria. You know that movie, Sound of Music? You know that castle in Sound of Music? We had a workshop in that building, and I actually was sleeping in that building for a whole week. I can't yodel or whatever you call that kind of thing. But anyway, I digress. The deputy director for the biotechnology program in Singapore was sitting next to me for a whole week. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, back then, we didn't know anything about biotech, except that it was going to be big in the future. And every year, they invested so that 30 people could go away and do PhDs in biotech. You know how many biotech scientists Singapore has? Do you know how much patents they're generating in biotech now? You know how much income they're generating from biotech? We send 30 people away every year from our small economies, and even more, to do what? But there's no strategy. So they come back home, they can't find work. Right? They bonded. No strategic intent. That is the problem. It is not money. Problem is not money. And you could quote me on that.
Yeah, the problem is not money. Because we are pressed for time, I'm going to, with your permission, sir, ask anybody else who has a question to ask you during lunch. Is that okay?
You mean to buy me lunch?
And you could buy him lunch as well.
And a drink.
Or a drink. I was about to say so. Dr. Nurse, excellent presentation. Let's give Dr. Nurse excellent. I know he called Grenada St. Lucia, but you're going to let that one slide, right? Ladies and gentlemen, I know your tummies might be rumbling. Mine was. Lunch will be served at the Trade Winds restaurant. That is one of the main restaurants in the hotel. So if you exit through that back door, you should be able to find your way to the Trade Winds restaurant. Enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you back here at 1 o'clock. Okay, 1:15. Grenadians. Only eat and come back. We have lots more in store, panel discussion back here after lunch. So see you after lunch. Have a wonderful break.